and welcome to the 25th episode of Basha's Thoughts. Today, I want to talk to you about something a little bit different. I wanted to find a way to present my ideas in comparison to something else so that it becomes easier, because sometimes people just don't really know how to relate to what I'm saying. And so today I'd like to talk to you about Jordan Peterson, because he's one of those persons who have reached a lot of people. And so his ideas, his worldviews have resonated with a lot of people. And so I think that he could be an interesting point of view from which I could relate to some of the things that I'm talking about, so that it becomes easier to understand. Whenever you can relate to something else, you can understand things a little bit easier. So let me start by talking about my idea of what I understand that Jordan Peterson talks about. So keep that in mind. This is just my interpretation. Of course, you should definitely go and listen to him talk about his ideas if you want to know what he is actually saying. But I will make a little review of how I think that he might be thinking about things so that we have something to start with. Okay, so why does Jordan Peterson think that we have this world, this political world with a left and a right, and with all the types of problems that arise? Well, I think that he says that it's because we have hierarchies. He believes that there are hierarchies, they will always be present, they have always existed, and so we have to face that fact, and based on that fact, we have the left and the right, because on the right, we have more and stronger hierarchies, where we have greater differences. And if we go to the far right, well, then we start running into problems. When it comes to wealth, we will have the ultra wealthy people, and then we will have the masses who will be pretty much miserable and poor. And also in terms of all kinds of differences, there will be, the hierarchies will be accentuated. And in history, we have had periods when we have had these. One example is if you move towards ideologies like the Nazi ideology, where your identity is also strongly tied to, for instance, your, say, skin color or your eye color or things like that. Well, we have seen in history what this leads to. On a personal level, it may initially sound like a positive ideology for a number of reasons for you personally, and of course you would personally not do anything bad with it. And yet in history we see that it does lead to mass extermination of people. So it ends up being a very violent ideology that accentuates disgust and, well, accentuates certain types of fears that lead to a lot of violence. Well, then you say, okay, but that's the extreme. What about the other side? What if you go to the left? Is that more positive? Well, then everyone becomes sort of equal. We say everyone is the same. Now, this sounds really nice. That may also seem like a very good ideology. But of course, we know also that if you go to the extreme, well, then you start wiping out things like history, when you try to wipe out people's history, and you wipe out differences between people, and you start molding and creating the perfect citizen so that they will fit into this perfect utopia that you're trying to create. That too leads to a lot of problems. That too leads to mass murder. And in those situations, you will be murdering the oppressors because you will have to protect the system from whatever you consider to be someone who is different, who does not want to be molded for some reason. And who becomes the oppressor in the beginning you might actually feel that there are good reasons for maybe incarcerating some people. But then this line is going to slide, and then you will find yourself, for instance, imprisoning everyone who has a different point of view, all intellectuals, for instance, and killing them off by the millions, as history shows us. And you will create a lot of envy in that system, and a lot of judgment or a lot of righteousness. You should not have more than I have. How dare you? And if you do have that, then, well, we should report you as an oppressor and eliminate you. So that too leads to kind of mass murder on both extremes. So we are not happy with either extreme, and because Peterson says hierarchies have to exist, well, then this artificial way of trying to eliminate them, as left would have it, is not going to work. And so we always have to have a discussion between the left and the right, trying to find the best way of dealing with things and kind of trying to stay somewhere in the middle in some sense. So not too far right, not too far left. And it's important in his view, I believe, that censorship not be a part of the equation, because as soon as censorship comes in, you cannot have these discussions as to what is actually the best for us. And with our current media, which is very short form, it is very much like a headline type of media. Well, it's difficult to actually talk about any kind of complex issue, and so censorship is kind of a way to go for the media, because then you think, or ideally you filter out the dangerous ideas, whatever they may be, and you think that you're doing a good thing and you're censoring for the best of everyone. Of course, this is not really the case. However, that's how you explain it to yourself. So censorship is also something that he talks about, Jordan Peterson talks about. And then you might ask, well, okay, so we have this left and right, and we go back and forth, and we need to have these discussions, and is there any way out of this? And I think that his solution is to move towards individual, personal responsibility. So basically he says that, you guys, life is miserable. You are miserable. And so you should get your act together and improve who you are a little bit. You will never be good or good enough, but maybe good enough at some point. That's what you should be striving for. Face it, life is miserable, so are you. Here are some concrete steps for you to find any kind of meaning in your life. Because if you find improvement in you, if you through discipline can move into becoming a better version of yourself, well, then you will find meaning, and that's your meaning in life. And the concrete steps are, well, start with making your bed, then clean your room, just taking little steps wherever you are. Don't try to change the whole world. Start with yourself, start with little tasks, and you will find meaning in it. And he also would say, I think, that saying something, well, you are good as you are, is probably beyond useless, because it will not lead to any improvement. Because if you are not feeling good and happy right now, and someone tells you that you are good as you are, well, then they're not really giving you a direction to move in. And so you're confused. You're not feeling good, And they say, well, you are good. And so he would say that you need clear orders in order to get off your butt and actually do something in your life and become better. And so he would say that this is why we need to see life and you need to see yourself as miserable. And one might ask, but why does he focus so much on the negative, on this miserable life? Well, because we will all eventually feel bad. Even if you're kind of in a good place right now, at some point you will feel bad. And so you're just preparing for that. Whenever you fall into that, then you will know what to do. Make your bed, step number 1. And he has a list, I think, of 12 different things to do, 12 different steps, so that you can pull yourself out of misery. And he is all about showing the way. So he's about trying to create a change. And this is why I think he also ends up in these discussions of truth. And he has this greater focus on a type of, I think he calls it a metaphorical truth, where you try to show how to do something as opposed to focusing on objective facts. And this is a little bit what we were actually talking about, I think in the last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, where we talked about the difference between describing something as it is and actually wanting to accomplish a goal, that the road may be very different. So we were talking about Maslow's hierarchy, and breathing is a basic need for us. We need to breathe. If you do not breathe, you will not fulfill any of your other needs. However, focusing on breathing is not always the best strategy for living in general, for accomplishing and fulfilling all of your needs. So even though it is a basic need, maybe focusing on that is not the best way to go. So these are kind of the 2 different types of truths that Jordan Peterson will tend to talk about with others and discuss with others. One is truth as a tool, as a way of getting something, as a way of accomplishing a goal. And the other one is this descriptive, objective fact type of truth. And this is why I think that Jordan Peterson also likes religious texts, because they talk about this metaphorical truth. So even though they may not be accurate when it comes to the details, they tend to provide a good description for how to act, not of what is, but of how to act in different situations. And if you act in that way, well, then things will be better, society will be better, you will be better. So I think that that's why he also tends to talk a lot about these religious texts, because they contain these kinds of recipes for life, even though the particular truths that they talk about are not objective facts. And Jordan Peterson also seems to be against this postmodern idea of creating your own identity and the neo-Marxist ideology. And I think that's how he became maybe well known in the beginning, because he was speaking out against putting a law where it says that it's forbidden to have certain differences that are biological, in a sense. It was this gender discussion about what gender is, and I think that he was speaking out against putting this into a law, because then you're moving towards the left, in a sense, that you're starting to try to create your own perfect citizen, and you're even by law trying to disregard certain biological truths. And so I think that because of that, people have automatically pegged him as the opposite, and then even said, well, he's a Nazi. Well, I don't see him as that. I see him as being more kind of in the middle and focusing on personal responsibility. And I think that he focuses on the critique of the left more, perhaps, because I think that he feels that most people don't see the danger of it as clearly as they might if they were, say, presented by a swastika. A swastika will deter a lot of people very quickly, just the symbol of it, whereas ideas that are far left may eventually lead to mass murder, just as the opposite may, but they are not as clearly visible. And people who do not know history, especially maybe younger people, might be led astray. I think these are more or less my ideas around what I think that Jordan Peterson talks about. So I am sure that they are not 100% accurate, but this is something that we can start with. All right, so this is one point of view, one way of looking at the world. What do I have to say about this? Well, to start with, there is one thing that I have found to work really well in this world of ours, and that is the idea that what you focus on, you will tend to get more of. So what you convince yourself of, you will tend to find evidence for, and you will tend to reproduce in your life. This is true in so many different ways. Even if you, say, sprain your ankle, all of a sudden you will be noticing that you're surrounded by people who are limping. You had never seen them before, and now you notice them. My goodness, so many people are limping. Because your focus shifts a little bit, and you're more focused on problems with feet or with legs. And so you will tend to see that, so you will tend to notice that. Or you can do an experiment and you can focus on red butterflies. And all of a sudden, you will start seeing them everywhere. You will see them on book covers, you will see them online, you will see them flying by you. And in so many different places, and your life will start becoming full of red butterflies. Now, of course, they were always there, you just didn't notice them. But it's more than that. It's more than just noticing what is around you. It has to do with your ideas as well. If you convince yourself of something, well, then you will tend to come up with arguments for it. And then you will tend to come up with evidence for it. And you will go deeper and deeper into a particular type of view of things. And when you do that, you will also start to act in a different way, and you will start to reproduce those types of effects around you and in your life. So, if life is miserable, you are miserable. We have to have hierarchies. We are stuck in this left-right system. Well, if these are your very set views, well, then they will be self-reproducing. They will tend to reproduce more of that. So as long as you really believe in that, you will tend to find more and more evidence for it. And of course, you will find both of these types of truths that we were talking about. You will say, well, this is just a fact. This is an objective fact. Look at it. And I can show you for a fact that this is what life is like. This is where we have the hierarchies. This is where we have the left and the right. This is the history where we have been fighting between the left and the right. And all of this, it's a fact. You have to see it. And also, as a tool, you have the truth as a tool, and you can say, and you have to see life as miserable, because if you don't, you won't get off your butt and you won't do anything about it. So you have to face this fact. So this is the best thing you can do. So now you have, wow, really convinced yourself, because you have the descriptive fact, the objective fact, and then you have also the prescriptive, the prescription for how to live your life. And how to live your life is to face this and know that this is a truth, because that's the only way that you will find any meaning in your life. And then you go around and around and around in your mind, cementing these kinds of pathways, neurological pathways, until you get an autobahn, and all of the other possibilities are no longer even possibilities, because you have such strong arguments, and you will stick to this autobahn of neurologically set ideas and ways of looking at life, living life. And you will keep reproducing them. Okay. But then you ask, so? But that seems to be the truth. Now we have found that this is the objective truth, and we know that this is the best way to live. So what are you saying, Basha? Well, I'm saying maybe, just maybe, there is another way of looking at everything. But then you might ask, how so? So should I just ignore the truth? Should I just close my eyes, not listen to anything, and say, this isn't it, this isn't happening? Well, is it an emu that does that? Who hides their head in the sand and doesn't want to face what is actually going on? Is that what you're proposing? And I'm saying no. What I'm proposing is to see things even on a deeper level, to go beyond these two truths that we were talking about, the descriptive and the tool truth, and actually see and know that there is another truth. But to do that, we have to be open in moving in that direction, because we have already cemented our particular ways of looking at the world. And so it will not be easy. So it's important to know that it's not going to be easy to see something in a different way if you've always seen it in a particular way, and you have very good reasons for looking at it in that way. So what is this other way? What is this other truth? We can look at it as a metaphor in the sense of the x-axis. You know, in mathematics, sometimes you have the x-axis, it's a coordinate system, and then you might have a y-axis. So let's take the x-axis, and on it, let's put this left and right. It's easy to think about it, a horizontal line where you move to the left or you move to the right, and it's a little bit like a pendulum, and you're swinging between one or the other. And you might also say, well, we can find our truths here. It's either one truth or the other. This is where we're at. So what I'm proposing is, let's move in another dimension. And let's move up. Let's move up the y-axis. What does that mean? What truth is that? This is the truth. This is the reality that I have been talking about in my podcast. So I believe in one of the first podcasts, you will hear me talking about reality and the truth that I'm referring to. So that might be helpful. But this is the deeper truth. So the idea is not to identify, for instance, in one of the extremes with your differences. For instance, I'm going to identify with my skin color, skin tone, eye color, or hair color. That's going to be something that is important to me. That's one way of identifying with something. Or maybe on the other extreme, you say, well, I'm going to identify as the perfect citizen. I'm the perfect molded citizen so that I fit in with everyone and we all help each other. And this is what it's all about. And I identify as that. Both of these are on the same line. To move beyond it, the idea is to move towards this other truth, is to move away from identification. So you stop identifying. You stop identifying with a particular role, as we spoke in another podcast. Whenever you identify with a role, the stronger your identification with that role is, the stronger the fears related to that role become, and the stronger the types of negative feelings are. So for instance, if you identify with your skin color very strongly, well then you will start creating, for instance, disgust when it comes to the other races or the other maybe cultures or the other whatever it is, because that will actually start becoming a threat to you. If you identify as that perfect citizen, well then envy will become very strong for you, and jealousy in that sense as envy, and you will become very righteous and judgmental. And so you will have a slightly different series of negative feelings coming up for you. And all of these are related to fear. And so whenever you can loosen up your identity with any kind of role, you can actually loosen up the fears that are related to it. So what if we had a way of living as actors? You know, an actor does not really truly identify with a character. They kind of identify it, but they know that they are not that character. And so they can live fully as that character, embody it, enjoy it, but their actual fears will not really be triggered because they know that they are not limited by it. So this is the idea of moving up the y-axis, moving away from identification. And why is this true? Why is this an even greater and more profound truth for us? I mean, isn't it true that I have a particular eye color? Well, shouldn't I identify with it then? Well, then we ask, is your eye color you? Are you that eye color? No, it's only one little aspect of who you express yourself as. You're expressing yourself as a human being. You have a body, but you're not really a body. You have a mind, you have thoughts, you have opinions, but you are not those. That is a deeper truth. And that is the direction in which we can move. And as we move towards that, we loosen up the grip that fear has on us, because we move beyond those limitations. That's the idea. That's what I'm talking about. To find a way of moving in another direction. And why is it important to start moving in that direction? See, imagine that you live on this tiny little cloud in the sky, and someone tells you, you know, your cloud is really bad, it's really limited, and there are so many problems with it, and you shouldn't really be on it. Well, you won't even entertain those ideas really seriously, because that's the cloud that you're standing on. If you let go of the cloud, you're going to fall. You won't have anything to stand on. You won't have anything at all. So you don't want to let go of your cloud, and you won't actually be open to listening to alternatives as long as you're standing on that cloud. But if someone shows you a little bridge, and then as you walk across the bridge, you get to another cloud, and this is a large cloud with so many benefits, and it's so nice to be on. And you start walking across the bridge, and you get onto this other cloud. Now, as you're standing on this other cloud and you're looking back, you say, you know what? I see what you mean. I see the limitations. It was a tiny cloud, and it was whatever it was. And you can see the problems with it. You can allow yourself to see, because your safety is not dependent on it. Now you can start seeing other things, other alternatives, other ways of looking at things. That's why it's important to start taking that step, so that you can start allowing yourself to see things in another way. So if you are stuck in the idea of the left and the right and the perpetual existence of hierarchies, and this is a fact, and this is the only way things have ever been, will always be this way, and it's the best way to look at things because that's the only way you can have meaning, well, then you're really, really, really stuck in that. It's like this little cloud that you're stuck on, and you're holding on to it for dear life, because that's where your safety is. That's how you find your meaning. You cannot find meaning in another way, and so you stick onto it and you defend it until death. So, in order to be able to see some of these limitations, we need to find that bridge. And the bridge is not something that I'm saying we have to live on. I'm saying it's the first step that can start to allow yourself to see things from another perspective. And then we may be able to move into other ways of being and living. And that also pertains to this world. That also pertains to how we organize our world. So, for instance, the idea of hierarchies always having to exist. In a sense, yes. But there are many other ways of looking at things. See, when are these hierarchies the most destructive? When do problems arise for us with them? Well, one idea is that when you have really large amounts of power, say, then the human being becomes corrupted and problems arise, all types of problems. So what if you could, for instance, reduce those in some way? Well, you can do that. Right now, for the first time in history, we can actually organize things, large things, huge things, without hierarchies. We can base it on autonomy, and we can have systems that actually have real-time feedback and organize things for us based on autonomy instead of focusing on the idea of building on hierarchy. Does this mean that there will not be any types of hierarchies? No, but maybe we could work on the most destructive ones and find alternative ways of dealing with that. We have that right now for the first time ever because of computers, because of how far we have come in terms of developing these types of systems. So there are many different things we could do, ways of possibly improving our world. But to move in that direction, we have to be willing to let go of the cloud that we're standing on. And so this is why pretty much all of my podcasts are focused on, right now, just pointing in that other direction. Hey, there's another dimension. Instead of being at the bottom of the pendulum, swinging left and right, let's climb up the pendulum. Let's move in another direction, another dimension. And from there, we will be able to see things differently, and we may be able to find better solutions for things. And it is from that point of view that ideas like, of course I am worthy, of course I am beautiful, those become self-evident beyond facts, and facts become even smaller things because they are on a different level of truth. And it's when we see that we can use that in a constructive way in our universe here. But of course, if we are limited to the x-axis, saying that you're good enough or saying that you're worthy, but without having access to that dimension, it doesn't make any sense. And you're just lost, stuck, and confused. And the only way out is for you maybe to say, well, I'm miserable and I'm always going to be miserable, but I can make myself a little bit better. And so you find your meaning. And that's how you struggle through life. So it is only when we find this other dimension that we can start to see things in other ways. It is only when we remove ourselves from a situation that we can have a bigger picture of what is going on. And so what I'm saying is, hey, this sounds interesting. I want to figure that out. I want to be able to see more of that. I want to become freer and able to see things from that perspective. And that perspective is moving away from identification as anything, as anyone. That's a part of it. Of course, this is only the first part in the two-step process, but as I mentioned in the podcast episode about the enlightenment process, the two-step process there, but it's the first one, and just starting to take that will start to liberate us in so many different ways. How many different ways? What ways? And that's kind of what I'm talking about in the different episodes. So how do we save the world? How do we find the best ways of being, acting? How do we find beauty, meaning, love? How do we create that beautiful society where things work, where most people are happy? Is it possible? How do we go about it? Well, the idea here is to start by loosening the grip that fear has on us, because fear is blinding, and often our defense mechanisms are blinding. They will react and engage before we get to feel the fear. So we're not even aware that we're feeling fear. And we are already fighting for and protecting things that may not be worth protecting. But it's the only alternative we see, and so that's where we are. This is why the idea of starting by loosening up the fear can be a strategy that gives us greater perspective and a better vision of what is going on. And it gives us the possibility of acting from a platform of love, which is the opposite of fear. So if you can be in love and act from love, you have so much won already. And that's the idea of moving in the Y direction, of moving in the direction of loosening up one's identification with all sorts of ideas that we might have around ourselves, so that we can live from love, but fully engage in this world without fear or very little fear. That's the idea. And then we can also use our knowledge about humans and our knowledge about what human beings are like, because we can look at that in a more objective way, and from there design systems. So if we know that as humans we like to find new horizons, new ideas, new things, we like to grow, expand, well, we have phases when we do that, and they seem to be very positive. But when whatever we're expanding in seems to be limited, well, that leads to the negative side of us coming out. So what if we could devise a system that creates perpetual abundance for us, in some sense? And these are the types of things that we're starting to actually be able to find now with the new technology. It's not just a little step, it's not just a small new extra technological device that we have. The main thing is our ability to organize without hierarchies and through autonomy, which creates the possibility of a completely different system that is capable of working in abundance, being an emergent order system that continually gets input from what is going on. These kinds of things are possible, but to actually design them well, we do need to look from a perspective that is not too limited, not blinded by fear. And this is why this is such an important dimension to move into. Moving into the dimension of love, moving away from fear, the dimension of truth, because it is a deeper truth of who we are, moving into the dimension of letting go of our identity as something. Well, doing that, we move into a place from which we can create from love, and we will be much better equipped when it comes to creating these abundant systems that we're interested in. And technologically, we're almost there. That was it for today, and I look forward to talking to you in another podcast. Take care.